Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Rachel, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so excited that you're here for this intuitive development journey. And I am so excited to connect with you today. Guys, how was your Lionsgate portal experience? How was the 8th, August 8th? And now that we're just coming out of that energy, how are you feeling? Are you feeling a little tired or are you feeling really uplifted? I feel like for some people, it's either one of two ways, right? Either you feel really inspired and really energized, and sort of ready to go with all of the downloads that you received. And other people feel like they got so much information and so much energy came through that as the energy passes on, you kind of just feel the need to go inward and retreat. And that's all normal. So if you do feel that and you're kind of feeling a little lower in energy this week, it could just be the passing of the Lionsgate portal energy kind of leaving your system and your body just needing a minute to recalibrate and reintegrate some of the energy that's coming through. So just know that it is a magical time, but it can also be a bit of a draining time because it was such a huge influx of energy. So if you're feeling the need to go inward and to retreat and to be a little less social this week, allow yourself to do that. Give yourself the grace to do that. And so I do want to say that my Lionsgate portal energy was different than last year. For sure. For me, last year, it was really a lot of energy coming through, a lot of inspiration, a lot of intuitive hits and downloads, and a lot of new ideas coming through. Whereas this one seemed to align a little bit more with the honest August energy forecast in a different way, in the sense that any sort of issues or things that came up during the firework energy of July felt like sort of repeating patterns, right? So, maybe having the same argument with my spouse over and over again, or the same issue with my toddler over and over again. I'm just kind of seeing that happening on repeat a lot. And then through the Lionsgate portal, it seemed to kind of finally we hit a breakthrough and we kind of solved all of it. And so I stopped seeing those patterns repeat, and suddenly everything's feeling a lot more even keel. And we're not kind of coming up against the same questions, the same tests, the same arguments, the same frustrations that we were kind of having on cycle in our household. So now we're sort of in this place where our household feels a lot more in flow, where everything is a lot easier to navigate. We're all just communicating better, and all of the sort of hiccups that we hit in July have just sort of fizzled out and are kind of have been solved and resolved, so to speak. And so that was sort of my Lionsgate portal energy for me. It was sort of like all of the questions I'd been having and all of the issues that I've been wondering how to solve kind of worked themselves out throughout the portal. And then we haven't seen a repeat of patterns again. So it was a very interesting experience for me and not exactly what I was expecting. I was expecting a lot more of these big hits and these big intuitive downloads. And honestly, for me, not a lot of big, inspiring, action steps came through. There were two things that came through that were sort of, again, questions I'd been having that finally I got clarity on, of like decisions I needed to make. Do I do this or do I do that? And through the Lionsgate portal, the answer came through of yes, do this, no, don't do that, right? So those were solved for me, but there was nothing sort of new or out of left field this time. Whereas last time it was like, you need to start a podcast, do it now. So that was a little bit different for me. So I'm curious what it was like for you. Definitely reach out to me, send me an email, or reach out to me on Instagram at I am Jessica Rachel. I always love to hear your Lionsgate portal stories. That being said, if you did get a lot of intuitive downloads or hits and they do feel a little bit out of left field, or you need some more clarity on what you think came through, I do want to support you in this time. And so just for podcast listeners, I am going to throw out there a little promo code for a spiritual guidance session with me. You can use the code LION, LION, all caps, for 15% off a spiritual guidance session with me. And I'm going to have that code only available till the end of August as you're sort of of contemplating what the Lionsgate portal messages were for you, and if you need some support. As of right now, we have a few spots left in September, and then we're moving on to bookings in October. So if you think you might want a session, definitely grab the coupon code, get your 15% off, and come and work with me. It's been so lovely. I feel like lately, the last few weeks, a lot of my clients that I've been seeing have been you guys, have been podcast listeners. And that's so exciting for me that I get to actually meet you face to face and see the beautiful faces of people who are either watching me on YouTube or listening to me on this podcast. And it's so nice to know that I'm not just talking into the void and that you're real people and you're out there. And it's been such a pleasure getting to meet a lot of you over the last month or so, as many of you have been signing up for spiritual guidance sessions. So just as a little incentive, if you feel like you need some more clarity around some of the Lionsgate portal stuff, definitely grab that coupon code. So let's talk about today's episode. As you probably saw from the title, it's a little bit of a all over the place run. It says, I think I called it Starseeds, Mermaids, Fairies, and Aliens. And I know that's kind of like a whole big span of things that I'm trying to fit into one podcast, but they do all sort of fit under the category of starseeds. Now, a lot of you have been asking me over Instagram to do a podcast episode on starseeds for a long time, and I have been procrastinating and, more importantly, hesitating to do it because I was worried that I didn't have enough information about the different types of starseeds, and I wanted to be able to give you truthful information and sound information and well-researched information. And then when I was talking to my spirit guides about it, I sort of came to the conclusion that, you know what, I do have enough experience having channeled for many star seeds myself that I can go off of the star seeds that I've actually met. And so this is not going to be a all, inclusive episode about all of the different types of star seeds and all of the different types of places that your soul can hail from. We're really going to focus on sort of the ones that I really have had a lot of experience channeling for, and just going to give you the information based off of my own experience, as opposed to giving information from research that I may have done, because I feel like it could be different. I mean, the experience that different mediums have, or maybe have posted on blogs, right? I don't know it to be completely true as much as I know what I've channeled to be completely true. And so I'm only going to give you the information that I have personally experienced. And again, I do encourage you can go out and research it. There are some authors I will mention today that definitely have more to say about these things than I do. Because that's sort of where they tend to sit, or they really strongly identify as a starseed, and so they can offer a little bit more along those lines. So this is going to be a little bit more of like a brief overview and sort of the things that I've learned based on the star seeds that I have channeled for. And I have to say, lately there have been a lot more of you coming up through the woodwork. So let's dive into this week's episode. Let's talk about star seeds, fairies, mermaids, and aliens. And so the first thing that I do want to start by saying is, let's come up with sort of a technical definition of what is a starseed. So for those of you who are going, what the heck is she talking about? A starseed is, in comparison to a regular soul, so when we talk about an earthly soul, a typical soul, we talk about a soul who is incarnated here on the planet as a person, as a human, and you sort of learn your lessons and have specific lives, and then, and have specific experiences, and then you pass away and you go up and you kind of go into sort of what we call the astral plane. You decide what you're going to do for your next life, and then you're going to go back down and you're going to be a soul here on the planet once again. And you kind of rinse and repeat and do that over and over and over again, right? You have, and that's why we would call you an earthly soul. You keep coming back to this planet. You keep coming back as a person and every time you kind of learn something new, you up level, you elevate a little bit more each time. Well, a starseed is what we would call a soul who jumps around a lot, meaning that you don't always end up back here on planet Earth. Instead, you spend lifetimes in other places. Some people like to say other planets. I like to say other realms, or energy frequencies. And this is a soul who can have lifetimes here on Earth. I mean, we're talking about starseeds as currently who are people, right? But who have had a history of being in different places. And so we could call this sort of being in a different star system, right? We talk about different planets, perhaps different star systems, different realms, or different energy frequencies. And your soul will jump around back and forth between the Earth plane and other places. Now, there's a really beautiful medium and author. Her name is Rebecca Campbell, and she wrote a book entitled Starseeds, and she has a lot more to say about that. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely go and check out her book, and I will link it in the show notes as well. And she claims that, there's a chance that since our souls are infinite, right, there's a pretty good chance that we could possibly say that all of our souls are star seeds, right? If our soul has existed since the beginning of time and before then, right, our souls are infinite. At some point, your soul is not going to always be trapped in the earth cycle, right? At some point, your soul is going to choose to be elsewhere. And so then technically we could classify everyone as a starseed, but I mostly agree with this. And I do actually agree with this definition that chances are all of our souls have probably spent time in other places. But for the purpose of this podcast and helping you identify yourself as what typically might be considered a starseed, I want to base this off of sort of what your most recent incarnation was. And so our working definition for starseed is going to be, what was your most recent life prior to this one where you are incarnated on the planet? If your most recent life or your most recent lives, so even if we're talking about the last 2 or 3 lives, were here on the planet, we would probably define you as an earthly soul, right? A soul who maybe hasn't jumped around at least in the last couple of centuries. And if your most previous incarnation was somewhere else, right? You were a fairy, you were a mermaid, you were an alien of some kind, then we're going to call you a star seed. Now, the thing about the star seeds and why I keep including fairies and mermaids in here, because some people would not agree with me on that definition, is because I like to say that even if you're not from a star planet, right? When we talk about fairies and mermaids, and we'll dive really deep into what that means in a moment, technically we don't say that they're from a different star system, right? Those are different planes, those are different realms, kind of within the Earth realm, so to speak, but they are very different than being incarnated as a human. So I'm going to encapsulate both mermaids and fairies under that category of starseed, because to me it's that your soul was not incarnated as a person in your previous life. You were incarnated as another type of light being. And so if you were another type of light being prior to this lifetime, then in my definition, you are a starseed. And somebody else might argue me on that one, but that's sort of what I'm going to use. And so that's how I'm able to sort of lump all of those together. So I'm going to include sort of, and we're going to talk about all of the different things. And the thing about a starseed is, why is it important to know if you're a starseed in the first place? And the question really comes to, what is the role or the mission that you have to play in this lifetime? And so when we talk about an earthly soul, a soul who sort of has lifetimes over and over again here on the planet, the role that you play or the mission that you have is always and usually contributed to the previous lives that you've had. There's usually some unfinished business, some lesson that needs to be learned or experience that needs to be had, choosing to have an opposite or evolved experience from the previous one you've had. And this is also technically true for a starseed, except that there's sort of this feeling of, I'm choosing to come here as a person for a very specific reason when I didn't have to. I'm not caught in this loop of being a person and reincarnating over and over again. I'm not here to learn so many lessons. Instead, there's more of a feeling of, I have a mission. There is something that I felt that I was incapable of doing when I was in those other realms. And I'm coming here to help humanity up level or upgrade in some way. And depending on where you were and which realm you were a part of before you came here, will sort of determine what that mission is. And so it's helpful to identify what type of starseed you may have been or where your soul has been prior to this lifetime in order to help you really figure out what's your path and your purpose in this in this life. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about those very specific purposes that you may have had. I do want to talk about some common traits that starseeds have first. And so if you're from any of these realms, what you might be experiencing that might help you identify if you are a starseed. And so the first one is sort of this feeling of urgency. You kind of feel like, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about earth angels, because it's the same thing. You're coming from a different realm, right? You're coming from a different place and choosing to be here incarnated on the planet when before you were existing in a much more light place, right? A place that was a lighter realm, an easier, technically an easier realm in a lot of ways, whereas the earth plane has a lot of density. And so the choice to come down and be incarnate on the planet is typically not an easy one. It's usually because you have a very strong mission and feel that it can only be achieved by being here on the planet, by being a human incarnated. And that's the way that you're going to access people in an easier way and help them in a more specific way. And so know that the choice is never an easy one when you come to incarnate on the planet, because you're coming from a place that was possibly a lot more easy to exist in. And so there's this urgency of I'm going in, I have this mission, I need to achieve it, and then I'm on my way out. Another thing that all starseeds have in common is sort of this feeling of fish out of water, where you kind of feel like it's weird for me to be a person. And chances are, and this will be different depending on this type of starseed that you are. There are some starseeds that do this jumping back and forth. So they kind of go to one realm, and then they come back as a person, and then they go to a different realm, and then they come back as a person. So they've had maybe more experiences here on the earth plane. But there are some starseeds who have never been here before. They've never been incarnated on the planet before. They're choosing this is their first time to come down and be incarnated as a person and live in this dense place. And so that can be a bit of a challenge for them. And so depending on how much experience your soul has had here on the earth plane will sort of determine how much of a fish out of water you kind of feel. But you may sort of feel like, I don't understand the way that things are going here. Maybe you have a little bit more of a sensitivity to sensory input things, like things being too loud or being in big crowds, right? Depending on what kind of a light being you were before, it could be really frustrating to be in a physical body in a lot of ways. If you were sort of a light being who was on a planet where if you thought it, then the thing manifested, and there was no delay between the time you thought of something and that thing being created. It can be very frustrating for you to have to wait, have that delay of like, I think the thing and I have to now use my body to physically create it, or there's a lag in the timeline a little bit. And so you can find yourself being maybe frustrated very easily that things aren't happening fast enough. And again, that plays into that urgency as well of I'm here for a mission, I'm here for this one lifetime, and then I'm out and I'm going back to my other realm. And so I really need to kind of get things done fast. Why is it taking so long? So you may find that as well, but then you also may find frustration with actually just the mundane tasks of having a human body and having to upkeep a human body. So I find that some star seeds really find it frustrating or annoying to have to eat 3 meals a day and often forget to do that, or they find it frustrating to have to sleep for 8 hours a night, or anything that sort of gets in the way of having to fulfill their mission. They feel very I guess slowed down by the things that are required of being a person and to maintain a physical human body, because they may have been a light being before where they weren't incarnated into a body. And so maintaining that body becomes tedious for them and often the last thing they want to think about. And so they find those things frustrating for sure. They may also find having to use their body to be very frustrating. And so they're either really excited about having a physical body and are really, really athletic. But oftentimes I find that it's a little bit of the opposite of just kind of going, oh, I hate that I have to maintain this body and that it doesn't work as fast. I just want to get from here to there. And my clumsy fingers aren't doing what I'm trying to get them to do, right? There's sort of this feeling of, I have this idea and I want it to come through and I want to create this thing and bring it into the planet. And in a lighter realm, you think it and it appears, versus here, it's like you think it and then you have to go and create it and make it happen. And so that lag, that delay, that having to actually do it yourself becomes very frustrating and it can cause a lot of impatience for sure. Um, and so those are some of the signs of star seeds that I find for most of you, but we're going to talk about the ones that are a little bit more specific to depending on which realm your soul is from. So I'm going to start by some of the more, what I like to call the earthly realms. These are ones that I'm slightly more familiar with just because I know that my soul has spent some time in these places, in each of these realms. And then we're going to move on to some of the more star related realms that I have experienced by channeling for clients. So let's talk about the fairy realm. Let's start there. And I say that this is a realm that is actually, I call them an earthly realm because it kind of exists within the earth plane. And so I've described this before, sort of when we talk about the different realms, if we think about the earth as a sphere, and then we think of sort of like rings around the earth. And then as you go further out, there's like the different realms where your spirit guides may live, and where your angels live, and vice versa. So within the earthly plane, so the earth plane, there are other realms that exist on this planet, but they're not necessarily visible to the naked eye because they're vibrating at a different frequency. So they still live among us. The question is, are you attuned to that energy enough that you can actually see them, hear them, and experience them? And so this is what I'm talking about when I talk about fairies. Fairies do live on the earth plane. They very much live on the earth. However, they are aligned with an energy that may not be visible to every human eye. And when we speak about fairies, they have a lot to do with protecting Mother Nature. So that's sort of the role that they play here on the planet. So they're here and they're working with the plants, the trees, nature, Mother Nature in a lot of ways. They're protecting her, they're advocating for her, they're helping boost the environment around the tree systems and forests to protect them from negative energies that maybe come from human interventions, such as cell phone towers and 5G and all of the things that typically, and Wi-Fi typically, that might actually affect the healing properties of certain plants or the ability for a plant to thrive and survive. And so fairies are really working on the energetic level of protecting plants so that, number one, that does serve humans because you know that we need oxygen and we need those plants just as much to be thriving and surviving, also to eat, but also for the sake of the planet in total. And so fairies are really, really working very hard to help with the energy that surrounds plants and helping support their environment so that they are able to thrive and survive. And so when people describe fairies, we often describe them as being in an enchanted forest, right? Or a fairy-like forest. And that is very much true, right? That if you would experience or be able to connect more to the frequency of a fairy realm if you are in a wooded place that is far away from human technology. And so that's sort of where we would say that they live. They sort of live amongst the plants, and their job very much is to protect those plants in a lot of ways. However, there's another side of fairies, which is that they also support and guide people towards the magical healing powers of plants. And so fairies will often act as spirit guides for a lot of souls, earthly souls and star seeds alike, to help guide them towards their mission and purpose of helping heal others through Mother Nature. And so somebody who maybe has the role of medicine woman, apothecary, someone who advocates for essential oils, or naturopaths, even doctors, nutritionists, anyone that sort of uses or encapsulates the idea of using plants or plant-based ingredients to help support the human body is often going to have a fairy-like guide, and a fairy who's connecting with them. And so this is where there needs to be a distinction made, because when I will connect to your spirit guides, if I see that you have a fairy, that fairy of yours is I'm connecting to your fairy from a fairy realm, not from a spirit guide realm necessarily, right? They're not sitting up in the same plane where your spirit guides are. They're sort of sitting in the fairy realm, but they're still acting as your spirit guide. And so they can do that. And so yeah, there's sort of like this nuance here of you can have a fairy guide if you yourself were previously a fairy, which is typically the case, that if your soul has had a lifetime as a fairy, then you will definitely have a fairy spirit guide who is going to be following you around and serving you and helping you channel through that information about how you're supposed to use Mother Nature to help support other people in healing their physical bodies. Um, but you may also just be an earthly soul who has a fairy guide, because that is one of your missions and that's one of your passions, and the fairy is helping you in that way. So it can be a little bit of both, but I would say typically, usually, you have a fairy guide because you yourself were a fairy at one point. The other role that a fairy might have, and we say that yes, they can use plants to help with the physical body, but it can also be to help with mental health as well. And so some people who have a mission to advocate for the healing power of Mother Nature on a mental level, on an emotional level, are also going to be guided by fairies, right? And so people who really are always advocating for, if you're feeling unwell, go and sit in the forest, go and do grounding or earthing, and right, all of those things. Again, also going to be sort of brought forth through the inspiration of fairies. And so how to tell if you may be a fairy starseed or a fairy soul, or have a fairy soul? I would say chances are you feel most at home in the forest. Okay. So, Mother Nature, yes, in general, but definitely in that forest setting. Like when you go into the forest, you feel lit up, you feel alive, you feel at home, you feel most comfortable. Chances are you have a soul who is a fairy, because that is technically where the fairies tend to dwell, or where that energy frequency is most powerful and potent. So you definitely feel most alive and most at home amongst the trees and surrounded by nature in that respect, where there's a lot of kind of dense forest. You definitely will have a love, more specifically for Mother Nature in all aspects of healing. So you probably have a tendency to lean maybe away from things that don't feel, how do I say this nicely? Because technically doctors could still have fairy guides, but I want to say that you may lean a little bit more towards a holistic or more natural means of supporting the human body, and you have a strong interest in those things, as opposed to maybe one who doesn't care at all or is happy either way, right? It's somebody who feels the need to strongly advocate for natural remedies over other human interventions, I guess I should say. And so very much advocating for a holistic approach, using plants as medicine, using foods as medicine, using essential oils and homeopathic remedies and all of those things, flower remedies, as a healing power. The healing power of Mother Nature means a lot to you. So other defining factors of a fairy soul is that it actually can relate a little bit to your personality. So you can be a little bit sassy at times. If you think about the Peter Pan, for example, and you think of little Tinkerbell and how she was kind of a little bit more sassy, when I channel for fairy guides, that really typically is the energy that they bring forth. There's a little bit of sass to them. There's a little bit of, you need to do this, and you need to do this now. And they'll sass you, right? Like they'll tell you things urgently, and so they don't mince words, I guess is the way I should say it. And so if you kind of find that you have a little bit of a sassy energy, a sparkly personality, that you might be a fairy as well. I also tend to find that people who have had previous lives as fairies, they tend to be a little bit more airy fairy, right? So you're maybe sometimes people may define you as a little bit flaky, right? Maybe you're not good at committing to things. Maybe you find yourself kind of wanting to jump into lots of different activities, and you kind of start something and then you pick it up and then you drop it and you move on to the next before you finish the previous thing, right? Kind of under that a little bit of a flaky definition, right? Where you don't necessarily follow things through. You like to kind of sprinkle your fairy dust on lots of little things and continue to move along. Everything's very light and bubbly and outgoing and airy, and that's sort of the energy you have. Lots of creative energy coming through you all the time, and it's not very grounded. So you get the ideas, and maybe there's an excitement with those ideas, you pick them up. But there's not enough grounded energy in you to actually follow through with them. That's pretty good chance that you were probably a fairy, because that's very much the energy. And so there's a little bit of that. But technically, I would say that if your soul has a fairy energy, there is really a strong mission or you or purpose for you that you have come through and decided to leave that fairy frequency and to be incarnated here on the planet to very specifically share that advocacy that nature can heal, and that you're really here to kind of use some version of that to help others. And so that can look like a lot of things. You could be, right, like I said, a nutritionist, or using essential oils, or a homeopath, or a naturopath, right? Like all of those things kind of come through. But you also might just be very creative as well. And so you might also be an artist in that you're using images of nature as means of uplifting other people as well. And so it can come through in a lot of different ways. But in some sense, you are using Mother Nature as a means of supporting the human body and encouraging others to experience and explore that themselves. So that's sort of the fairy energy. The other earthly realm that you may be, or that your soul may have experienced, is what we like to call a mermaid realm. So the mermaid realm is technically another earthly realm. Some people like to speak about these as different places, like physical spaces, when they talk about the lost city of Atlantis or the lost city of Lemuria. And they talk of them as potentially a physical place, an actual city that maybe sunk under the sea or that actually existed. This is not something that I am sure of. I don't know for certain if that is true, if that there was an actual city of Atlantis or an actual city of Lemuria, and now they only exist as an energy frequency. It's possible. I'm going to go by possibly that they still exist and it's not something that happened and then disappeared. My understanding is that they're a frequency similar to the fairies. It's just a different frequency that you could tap into. And if you tap into that frequency, then you can see them. And that mermaids still very much exist here on the planet, in the oceans to this day, if you're able to tap into the frequency of it and see them. So let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of a mermaid soul, or a soul who has had a lifetime in maybe one of these mermaid realms, such as Atlantis or Lemuria, or another one that maybe I haven't heard the name of yet. And so when we talk about mermaids, they're all about the vibrations. So this realm is all about sending the vibrations out from the oceans onto the planet to help support the emotional well-being of the souls here. So when we think about the fairies being a little bit more light, a little bit more fun, a little bit more airy, a mermaid, although they're a water energy, technically, it does feel a little bit more down to earth. It feels a little bit more grounded or soothing, and it's all about the vibration. And so mermaids are really souls that are masters of empathy, right? They can always sense what you are feeling, even if somebody didn't vocalize it themselves. Like if you had a mermaid experience, if you had a lifetime as a mermaid and you're here now incarnated on the planet, it's like you hear a different language happening at all times. Somebody could be speaking and you're reading the subtleties that are going underneath the surface at all times. You're always aware of the emotional language of other people. There is a vibrational energy to one's emotions. And so you see beyond the physical reality and you feel very deeply the energy that comes through from one's emotions and the frequency in which your body is vibrating, and if that is serving you or if that is working against you. And so they mermaid souls often come to the planet, they leave the mermaid realm and come here if they feel that they can help shift your vibration in order to help you become more aligned or up level in some way. And so often when I speak to mermaid souls, or previously in mermaid souls, they kind of feel like they show me their lives as a mermaid and kind of go, I was sending these vibrations and I was sending it out to them, and the people just weren't getting it. They were maybe receiving the frequency for a moment and then reverting back to their old ways, right? And so when we think about things like manifestation, right? In a lot of manifestation practices, people talk about needing to change your vibration, needing to change your mental capacity and the energy that you sit in, the energy field that you sit in, to become an energetic match for the things you're calling in. But if you don't sit in that for long enough, then you can revert back to old ways. And so somebody who's a mermaid soul feels that they can help people on a vibrational level to help them shift their energy forever or for good, right? Instead of just kind of only having glimpses of it. And so someone who was incarnated as a mermaid prior to this lifetime, they tend to be really good at manifestation in this life. They're really good at changing your energy. I've also seen some mermaid souls who are really good musicians. Again, there's something about vibration. So we talk about sound waves as a vibration. We talk about sound waves as a frequency that the soul is existing at, and that you can use music to shift the vibration of a person. And so when we think about even those meditations that have certain number of hertz, right? You say, like, if you listen to the frequency of love, then you'll call that in. And there really is something to that. And so some of these mermaid souls will actually come here to create that music, the meditations and the music that will help shift your vibration so that you can become a higher, truer, more aligned version of yourself. Um, their mission is always about helping you achieve the higher version of yourself, help to shift your alignment in some way. And so, this can also look like shifting your vibration in terms of your mental capacity. This can be shifting your vibration using energy healing as well. And I find that mermaids tend to be very telepathic as well. But usually they're really, really clear empaths. So in clear empath, meaning that they just always know what they're like an energy thermometer or an emotional thermometer. They always know what emotions you are feeling, even if you haven't vocalized it. They're always able to pick up on that energy. And often they're able to shift that energy for other people, simply by being in their presence. Which is really cool, or by creating some sort of work. They have some sort of mission to help teach people how to shift their vibration themselves so they don't always have to do it for you. So you might also be how to identify yourself as a mermaid is definitely that you feel most at home by the water. So you love the ocean, you love the beach, you feel most comfortable in the water, you feel lit up when you're swimming. You definitely will tend to feel like a fish out of water when you are here on the earth plane, because you're so used to sort of having a body that was always submersed in water. And so while you may be comfortable with having a physical body, it's hard to sort of be, a little bit like the Little Mermaid, right? Like to be on 2 feet. And so there can sometimes be a little bit of a clumsiness to you every once in a while. But in other senses, when we're talking about vibrations, you may also be really, really good at movement. And so you could be a really good dancer, right? And that's all about using energy to move your body and shift your energy. And you feel better when you do that, and it shifts your frequency. And so often I tend to find that it's usually that, as opposed to being clumsy. Fairies are definitely more clumsy than mermaids. I would definitely advocate for that. Mermaids kind of are, again, as I said, more grounded, slightly more embodied, and all about shifting energy through things like movement and sound and meditation and vibration and frequency. So, and then of course, if you're really empathic, if you often need a break from others to recharge your energy after you've been in a big crowd, you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, I really need some alone time now to recharge my batteries. You might have been a mermaid soul. um, you're very rhythmic, but um, yeah, sorry, I said that already. And I will say that also your inspiration may come from the waves. So, and or come in waves rather. So you sort of have these bursts of energy that come through. You have these bursts of inspiration and a little bit more of a capacity for follow through than a fairy energy will have. And so you have these bursts to share your gifts with people, and you kind of go through these phases of really pedaling to the metal and achieving some things and helping put your work out there, followed by these needs, moments in time where you really need to retreat, go within and recharge your energy. And you kind of take some time to wait for the new spurt of energy to come out again. And then you will go proceed to or continue to send your work out into the world. So you kind of have these moments of really intense work followed by moments of really intense isolation, or need to retreat. And also, mermaids really can be very powerful energy healers as well. Usually you're very clear, you can be very clear empathetic, as I said, but also clairsentient. So you may have a lot of healing energy coming from your hands as well. There are other star seeds that I find that that's stronger with. I really say with the mermaids, you really have sort of this clear empathy. You really are picking up on vibrations and the emotions of other people. So that's mermaids for you. I definitely identify with that one quite a bit. Both fairies and mermaids seem to be sort of, and when we talk about a star seed as well, I should mention that chances are you've done a few, right? Like star seeds are souls that jump around. They go from one place to the other to the other. And so your soul could have had experiences in many of these places, more than one, right? You could have been a fairy and then a person and then a mermaid and then a person, or you could have done fairy, mermaid, person, right? You could have done all of those things. And so if you feel like more than one of these is lighting up for you, it's very possible. Starseeds like to jump around. You don't necessarily stay in one realm for a long time. The only realm that sort of souls tend to stick in for a long time for some reason is the earthly plane, and earthly souls. And once we start in that loop, it's sort of like the life school for achieving enlightenment. And so it's almost like it can be the fastest way to do it. Although it feels like the longest, it's the most intense way to up level a soul's vibration. And so it can be really powerful, but also the earth plane is considered to be the most beautiful in the sense that it's the most fun. There's so much polarity here that you feel things so much more than you feel them in other places, because you have the polarity to recognize the opposite, if that makes sense. And so here there's so much darkness that the light feels that much sweeter. And so things are just so much more ecstatic and orgasmic and beautiful, in comparison to a place where it's always light and love and high vibe. It tends to get a little bit too, I want to say, mundane, and it doesn't feel as ecstatic or amazing as it does when you're here on the earth plane, when you have that immediate contrast right in front of you. Um, and so, souls feel it to be quite a gift to come to the earthly realm. And they really, although it can be hard for sure because of that polarity and that density, they often volunteer to do so, and want to do so. So that's really interesting. So anyway, now we're going to talk about a couple of the alien realms. Now, I do want to say that there are so many different star systems, and I'm only going to mention the two that I'm most familiar with in this episode, because these are the two that I've come across the most in channeling for clients. And I just don't want to give false information based on research that I've done as opposed to personal experiences that I've had. So now I'm calling them alien realms simply because they are realms that exist possibly, on a physical sense in a star system. But again, if we look at all of these realms, that's why I'm calling them realms as opposed to physical places. Or even planets for that matter, because I don't know that they are necessarily physical places. I think that they are energetic frequencies that you can tap into. And so, We're going to call them alien realms just simply for the potential speculation that they may exist on a physical place like a star, or another planet. But I like to argue that maybe it's just that they embody the energy of that place, but rather they're just a different frequency. Anyway, that's just my speculation. So there are many different star systems, alien realms. We're going to talk about the two that I know. So here's this one. I'd like is called, so we're going to talk about the Arcturians and the Pleiadians. So let's talk about the Arcturians first. I have been experiencing a lot of Arcturian souls coming through lately, usually as the children of other starseeds that I'm channeling for. So that's kind of interesting. I'm seeing it a lot. The guides that I have seen, Arcturian guides that I have seen who have come through, they do tend to look a little bit like aliens. They kind of look like these very tall, very slender, blue-skinned beings with bald heads. So you can imagine that is, imagine what you think an alien would look like, right? These really big heads with these really big eyes, and these long, lean, slender, kind of blue-skinned beings is sort of what I have always seen them as. And anyone who has ever had a lifetime there, often will have an Arcturian alien looking spirit guide. And so I'm usually very easily able to identify if you are an Arcturian, because your guide will look like one of these little blue men, or they're not little, but one of these blue men. And so these souls, the mission that they come here for, is really to sort of help upgrade or advance the science and technology, or our understanding of science technology in some way on this planet. So I want you to think of the inventors, the engineers, like anyone who's sort of like really strong in the STEM fields or the science fields, like those kinds of things. They're here to invent things. They're here to up level us in a big way and help us understand things or achieve a new level of societal abilities, so to speak, in order to support the human race in a different way. And the reason being, right, is because as we advance in technology, the things that that are required in our day-to-day life to do in order to support our human bodies become less important or less time consuming, which then gives us more opportunity to seek out things like spiritual experiences, and that up levels the planet in a big way. So think, for example, without the invention of things like washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, right, vacuums, all of those things would have had to been done by hand, would have taken a whole lot longer. And cars, right? So traveling becomes faster, right? All of those things have allowed us to up level because now we have more time to do other things. And so these souls that come through are extremely important for helping elevate humanity in a big way. Think about how many people have changed or tapped into their intuitive abilities simply by learning through podcasts, right? Which wouldn't have happened without the invention of internet. And how many people we're suddenly connected to, and teachers that we can meet and take courses from because of the internet. And so very much a necessity in the pursuit of human elevation, so to speak, or the ascension of humanity in some way. And so you will find that somebody who has had an experience as an Arcturian prior to being here on the planet, they're going to be very kind of science-minded. They're often going to be very brilliant, right? We call these like the brilliant minds. Think Albert Einstein, Elon Musk, right? For a fictional example, Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory, right? Where they have these brilliant, brilliant minds that are here to solve the world's biggest conundrums and bring us the coolest inventions and, help elevate the planet in a big way. And they're very, very brilliant. Often they can sometimes be very socially awkward. And this comes with, number one, them being so brilliant and so strongly, singularly focused on their mission. And partially because they potentially have not been embodied here on the planet before. And so their past life, again, these alien beings are not necessarily embodied in the same way we are. They're more a light being, so to speak. And so they're experience of being a person and socializing with other people has been different. Their socialization on the Arcturian realm is what we would call a telepathic one. There was no need for language, right? They just sort of sent messages telepathically, or they do send messages telepathically. So coming here to a planet where you actually need to use words to articulate what you are saying, that becomes a bit of a challenge for an Arcturian soul. And so they tend to be a little bit socially awkward, but usually it's paired with absolute brilliance. So that's very cool. Also Arcturians tend to be very, very good at things like astral travel. We're definitely going to do a whole episode on astral travel and what that means. But technically, for a short definition, right, this idea of being able to project your soul to other realms without physically moving there or without physically being in that place. So they're very good at that. Typical traits of an Arcturian, right? Um, you really do have that frustration that I spoke about at the beginning, right? Because this is a very telepathic realm. So this realm really where things manifested simply by thinking of them. And so there's sort of a delay in the articulation of what's in your brain and it happening and manifesting here on the earth plane. And you just want things to happen faster. And there's an intense frustration with the vision in your head not being able to be created here instantaneously. And there's a frustration in having to then go through the mundane thing of actually having to use your hands and technology to make it happen here. And that becomes your mission. It's usually an intense mission. It's usually very urgent. It's usually all encompassing, and it's usually all they can think about. And so that's sort of my understanding of Arcturians is you're here to up level us through a technology perspective, so that we can use these technologies in order to have more time to focus on things like our spiritual elevation. Which is such a noble pursuit. And we're very thankful that those people do come through to the planet. Um, so those are Arcturians. The last one I want to talk about, I actually have the least amount of knowledge about, but I do see a lot of people who are from here. And the reason I say I have little knowledge about it is because their guides are a little less obvious, I would say. And this is Pleiadians. And so Pleiadian, again, being another star system that they could be from, or a star system realm that they could be from. When I see someone who has Pleiadian guides, the guides themselves don't necessarily look like anything other than this sort of like shimmery pink light. And so it's very much an energetic experience. I don't necessarily see that they were embodied at all, right? This is really like an energy or light being kind of place. And so being embodied is definitely going to be very challenging for a Pleiadian. My understanding of Pleiadians is that they're really all about the energy healing. They're really about kind of bringing the frequency of love here onto the planet to help us really encapsulate that energy for the purposes of being whole and for and communicating and connecting with others better. That's my understanding. But I could be wrong. And if you are a Pleiadian soul and I'm saying it wrong, please feel free to reach out and let me know. I do find that anybody who's sort of had lifetimes in Pleiades, they tend to be very powerful energy healers. And so I do see them having a lot of clairsentience, right? The ability to use energy and send it through their hands. And they tend to be energy healers. They tend to love things like Reiki and all of those things because they're all about sending that frequency of love into your body and helping you realign and reshift and always help people come back to the frequency of love, which is the highest frequency. And so whereas we talk about mermaids sort of up leveling you to a higher frequency, I don't know that it would probably be to the frequency of love, but it's a little more of an exciting frequency, I would say. Mermaids kind of bring you to a place of alignment, whatever that is for you, versus Pleiades, they kind of bring you, no, sorry, I have that wrong. Pleiadians bring you to a place of alignment and love, versus mermaids kind of bring you to a place of up level, I guess, is to the next level. So they shift you out of your current state into a new one, versus Pleiadians, when they use their energy healing, they bring you back to sort of homeostasis, if that makes sense. So helping you function optimally for from where you're currently at, as opposed to shifting you into another realm, if that makes sense. I hope that's not a little too wishy-washy, but mermaids are for up leveling and Pleiadians are for a realignment of where you're currently at. And so, yeah, Pleiadians, they have a very loving energy, a very grounded energy, a very soothing energy. You definitely will know if you've met a Pleiadian because you just feel so soothed and so loved and so at home in their presence. And they tend to be similar to earth angels in the sense that you just feel like wrapped in a warm hug in their energy and in their presence. But different to an earth angel, they tend to be a little bit more um driven towards a path of I have a mission here, and their mission being, how can I heal people? Um, how can I help people be the best version of themselves, right? And they tend to offer things like routines and tactics, and they like to be coaches, they like to be mentors, they like to be people who are really going to assist you as you're going through the planet, and they'd like to talk about things like self-love and self-care, and they really kind of lean into supporting the self as you head along your journey and supporting you from where you're at this moment, as opposed to pushing you necessarily to being the better version of you. They push you to be the best version of you where you're currently at. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so that's sort of my understanding of Pleiadians. There's a lot of this, like, whenever I just see Pleiadians, I just see this beautiful kind of like cotton candy pink light all around them. And it's so beautiful. So that's sort of my understanding of Pleiadians. If you know more or you have other information, definitely share it with me. But that's sort of what I've experienced from channeling for clients. But either way, that is sort of my, like, in a nutshell, understanding of star seeds. And having souls from a different realm. I do want to say that if you do think you might be a star seed, I highly recommend taking some time and connecting with your guides. If you're not sure, based on what your guide looks like, will be a really good indication of where your soul is from. So if you feel like maybe I'm a star seed, but I don't know which kind, what does your spirit guide look like? Because that will tell you 100%. If your spirit guide looks like a fairy, that's the realm you were from. If your spirit guide looks like an alien, then maybe you were from one of the star systems. So that's a really good indication. I also highly encourage you to ask your guides then, what is your mission? Because you left your realm to come down and be embodied on the planet because you had a mission. You felt like there was something you couldn't do from the plane that you were on to support humanity in some way or another. So whether it's that you felt like you needed to be helping people one-on-one and you couldn't do that from the energy field that you were in, or maybe you felt like you needed to be able to use your voice to share these techniques. Maybe you were a mermaid and you were sending frequencies and you felt like it wasn't shifting people easily enough, so you needed to be up close and personal with them, or you needed to be creating music for them in order to shift their energy. Or maybe showing them certain dance moves to shift their energy, right? So there's always like a really strong mission that you came down for. And so this is, if you think you might be a starseed, really, really, I encourage you to tap into your guides and ask them over and over again, what is my mission? What's my next step? What am I here for? Because chances are you're only here for a very short time, which is to complete this mission. And then you're going to go off to some other realm after that. So I hope this has been an enlightening episode for you. I hope I've done it justice and it wasn't a disappointment. This is really based on what I have known about these particular realms. And so definitely reach out to me, and I'm Jessica Rachel, if you think you might be one of these star seeds, and share with me your experiences. And if there's anything I've missed, I'm always happy to amend that in our next episode. So definitely share it with me. And otherwise, I wish you guys a beautiful rest of the week. Bye, you guys.